As Brian said, MicroStrategy 9.3 Visual Insight has great new visualizations, it's simpler to use, has added analytics, and it's even faster to build great-looking dashboards. We'll begin the demonstration by using a report that contains American athlete biographical data, such as birth date, birthplace, and what sport and league they play in. Prior to MicroStrategy 9.3, the only way to visualize geographical data was with markers. In some instances, like the one we're looking at right now, the sheer number of data points is overwhelming, and it's difficult to spot patterns and trends. We can tell that the majority of the athletes come from the United States, and there are quite a few born in other countries as well, but that's about it. To help manage the number of data markers we're seeing, we can apply some filters. Visual Insight in 9.3 has a new search feature in the filter stack to make it easier to find attribute elements in large lists. Once I start typing a name for a country, I get all of the countries that match. You'll notice that as I define my filter selections that the map keeps updating to enable speed of thought analysis. However, if I want to make a lot of changes, this can quickly become an annoyance. With MicroStrategy 9.3, you have the option to make several changes to the filter definition and just apply the update once. But as I mentioned earlier, markers are ultimately not the best visualization to represent this data. In 9.3, we now have a density map that provides a better view. In fact, based on the size of the underlying report, MicroStrategy has suggested that the density map be used instead of the markers map. With this density map, it's much easier to see patterns in the data. We can see that the majority of American athletes born in the United States were born in the eastern half of the country, but that there are quite a few from the West Coast as well. There's also a significant number of athletes born in the Caribbean and in Europe who later immigrated to the United States, and overall, American athletes come from all over the world. Even though it's much easier to see data this way, we can still use the filters to find trends. If I look at baseball, there aren't any players coming from Africa, and the few from the European nations are coming mostly from the Netherlands and Germany. You'll also notice that a few players were born in Japan, and quite a number from the Caribbean. When we look at ice hockey, we see a very different pattern. You'll notice that the vast majority of ice hockey players come from Canada, the Great Lakes region of the United States, and the northern countries of Europe. Another new major enhancement to MicroStrategy 9.3 Visual Insight is the ability to support multiple data sets. I'm going to add a second set of data that contains historical information on Olympic medal counts. Once I've connected to this new data set, you'll notice that the dataset object list has changed, reflecting the new attributes and metrics represented in the new data set. I'm going to add a new panel to show our new image layout visualization, which allows users to customize geospatial maps. The image layouts can also be used to map non-geographical data such as floor plans for stores or manufacturing facilities. Changing the analysis is as simple as dragging and dropping new objects into the drop zones. If I want to show the two maps side by side, I can copy this map into the first panel. Now I have what could be the start of a new dashboard containing new two map types populated by two different data sources. In this first demonstration, I showed you two new visualizations, a density map and the image layout, simpler usability by applying all filters at once, and the ability to analyze data from many different data sources at once. To go deeper into the new analytical and dashboarding capabilities of the 9.3 Visual Insight, I am going to use a new dataset that contains private loans information from my financial institution that lends to individuals. To do this, I'm simply going to click the icon to create a new Visual Insight analysis and then pick my dataset. I'll start with the grid. As you can see, MicroStrategy automatically populates the drop zones to provide a starting point. As I mentioned earlier, all it takes to change the data displayed are easy drag and drop manipulations. Creating a new count of loans metric is as simple as clicking on the attribute and selecting the count function. I can even build new derived metrics off the existing ones, so I'll create an average amount funded metric by using one of the many shortcut metric editors. Now my most used analytics are just one click away. Once I have the metrics I want, I can redefine my grid by adding and removing objects. All I need to do to change a visualization is bring up the visualization gallery and pick something new, and MicroStrategy will re-render the analysis. The bar chart you're seeing now is just a different representation of the same data we saw in the grid. It's a little hard to see a pattern in the way the graph is laid out, so I'll resort it based on the metric value. If I want to add more information to this graph, I can easily add more metrics to it, like the count of loans metric I created earlier. Visual Insight's filtering capabilities make it very easy for people to manage their data and find the answers they're looking for. In MicroStrategy 9.3, we've added a new feature called Top N, which makes it quick and easy to do ranked filtering. To find the 10 states with the lowest average interest rates, all I need to do is specify the sorting criteria, the number of states I want displayed, and the metric I want to use. If I then decide that I want the lowest 25 states instead of 10, I can simply use the slider to redefine my filter. This newest version of MicroStrategy Visual Insight allows me to display multiple visualizations on one panel. If I know what I want to look at for the next chart, but not how to look at it, Visual Insight can guide me. I can start by pre-selecting the attributes and metrics I want to analyze. In this case, I want to see how the FICO scores and loan purposes affect the loan sizes and interest rates, so I'll pick those objects. Then when I select the visualization, Visual Insight will suggest a recommended chart type based on the attributes and metrics I selected. In this case, the green icon is indicating that I should use a scatter plot. Here I can see that as the loan amounts increase, there's a corresponding increase in the interest rates. I can also see that the loan sizes generally get bigger as the FICO scores improve. To make this easier to see, I can maximize the current visualization. To gain additional insights, I can move the FICO attribute from the rows to the columns. Now I can see that as the FICO scores improve, the interest rates drop, so that the people with the best scores are only paying half the interest rate that people with the worst scores are paying. I'm going to go back to the dashboard and add one last visualization. Since this will be a relatively small dashboard, all of my visualizations will be on one panel. But if I wanted to, I can add additional panels to make more room for more visualizations. For this last graph, I'll select a different variation of the scatter plot to build a heat map. Again, MicroStrategy automatically populates the graph so I have a starting point for my analysis, even though I didn't specify any attributes or metrics. To get a better look at the data, I'll maximize the visualization. We could keep the graph as is, but I want to see how the FICO score and the bank's proprietary credit grade match up. To do this, I'll pull the FICO range attribute into the columns and then bring the credit grade attribute into the visualization. Just as we'd expect, these two risk assessment metrics are highly correlated. People with the highest FICO scores tend to also have the best credit grades. To see how these attributes affect the average loan size, I can swap out the metrics. To make things easier to see, I can change the threshold colors. MicroStrategy provides several default threshold options so that I can get to my answers quicker. The darker greens represent larger loans, so what may be contrary to expectations, for any given FICO range, people with lower credit grades take out bigger loans than people with better credit scores. One of the last new dashboarding features I'll cover today is visualization to visualization targeting. This feature lets me convert graphs into selectors. To use it, I just need to specify the graph I want to use and then click on the attribute that will define the selector criteria. In this case, I'll choose the state attribute and have it target the other two graphs. By allowing people to put multiple visualizations on one panel and giving them the ability to create selectors, Visual Insight can be used as a rapid dashboard creation tool. I can resize the graphs and collapse the legends to optimize my real estate. Once I have the layout the way I want it, I can simply click on one of the bar chart risers, and the other two visualizations will update to show only the specified state's loan data. You can see how with the powerful new dashboarding capabilities in MicroStrategy 9.3 Visual Insight, any business person can create a dashboard in minutes without help from IT. Now that I have my dashboard, I have a few options for sharing my discoveries with my colleagues. I can export the underlying data for any of these graphs out to Excel to be analyzed by non-MicroStrategy people. Ideally though, all of your colleagues already have MicroStrategy and they have access to the Intelligence Cube that you use to build the dashboard yourself. However, if that's not the case, you still have this option. If you need a graphic representation of the data for something like a PowerPoint presentation or a Word document, you can export the whole dashboard or just one of the graphs as an image. MicroStrategy does have the option of rendering graphs on a white background, but that's not a feature I will be showing today. In most instances, you'll probably save the analysis within MicroStrategy, and for that you have two options. One is to convert the MicroStrategy analysis into a dashboard, or you can simply save it as a visual insight analysis for later usage. The last major update to Visual Insight that I want to talk about today is the network visualization. For this, I'll be looking at data from a restaurant concerning consumer buying habits. By using the network visualization, I should be able to perform a market basket analysis and see what menu items are frequently purchased together during the same meal. Each dot represents a menu item, and the lines represent connections to other items with the color and sizes indicating the strength of the item's associations. I can bring in another metric to define the node size, indicating how often those items are purchased. This is just one of the 3 different variations of the network visualization. The next one I'm going to show is called a force-directed layout and is probably the most common way to look at these network visualizations. By switching over to the force-directed view, I can find more intricate patterns. In the circular layout, it appeared that all of the menu items were interconnected, but we can see that's not the case. If I take a closer look at this data island in the upper left-hand corner, I can see menu items such as falafel, baklava, hummus, and couscous, all of which are vegetarian items. Now if I go back to the larger cluster, I could try to sort it out and see the connections there, but it might be too complicated because there's too many data points. You'll notice as I move this one node, there are dozens of connections to other menu items. To simplify this, I might want to use the filter stack. Here, if I change the sensitivity of the connections, I see a very different pattern. By eliminating the larger menu items, I can see the more intricate connections. Now I can see several distinct data clusters. If I zoom in on one, I can take a look at what menu items are associated with this cluster. And in this case, it looks like a lot of lunch entrees. If I look at another cluster, I'll see another set of menu items. Over here we see a cluster with 3 nodes. If I zoom in on this and mouse over it, I can see these are all the kid menu items. There's no way a bar chart or a graph matrix can convey this type of information, so the network visualization definitely brings a new class of data analysis to self-service business intelligence users. We can't cover all of the new enhancements and features introduced to Visual Insight in MicroStrategy 9.3 in the time we have, but as you can see, there have been a lot of significant changes to let business people visualize their data faster, build their own dashboards, and get the answers they need without the help from IT.